everyone. I'm not sure if this is actually working, but we will find out. Just give me a sec. I can't see it appearing in the group. It might take a while just to come
through, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll just give it a sec. There's no rush. No rush at all. I'll just give me a sec. I'll just message.
No, we're good to go.
Can you see it?
Yep. Yeah, we're good. Come through, yeah. Yep.
Sorry, just me. Okay, sorry. Just messaging my business partner to check, just to double check everything. Okay, so I believe it's working now. Good, excellent.
I mean,
yeah. So
awesome.
So if anybody is out there watching, hi, and if you're going to be watching this a bit later, hi. So just hi anyway.
Hi guys.
And I'm joined here by Luke, and I've been reading about Luke in different Facebook groups. I've been seeing your ads pop up everywhere, and you kind of stood out as someone who's really passionate about what they did. So, and you seem to have a wealth of expertise as well, which was really interesting, seeing all the different posts and everything that you've done. So, yeah, welcome.
Hopefully I haven't spammed too much.
No, not at all. Self-promotion is a good thing. Don't worry about that.
Thank you. Yeah,
how's business? Is that working for you by advertising in groups?
Yeah, it has. That's so a bit of a backstory. Basically put some ads and just some posts and bits and pieces to try and offer some information and value to some of the disability groups that I'm a part of. And from there, it kind of continued to build in the interest, and a little bit of awareness came out, and the client base kind of continued to come through there. And then with a little bit more awareness through LinkedIn and some connections, and not too dissimilar to the way we've kind of become in touch and chit-chatted away and created a little community. It's just kind of come through there. So as an essential health service, exercise physiology is still able to be and encouraged to be continued. So I'm still working with NDIS participants out in the community, albeit not so much or minimally in the home, and just more so outdoor, so in the backyard or in undercovered spaces, and we're making do. So yeah, going well.
Good. So you haven't found a drop-off in clients at all who might be a little bit apprehensive given the current environment with working with you, for example?
So there has been probably not so much a drop-off. There has been a shift from face-to-face services to telehealth. So that's probably the main one I could identify. There's one or two clients where it's probably not suitable to do face-to-face. Just the risks kind of outweigh what the benefits would be. So we're still able to get some really effective and some really good traction with our telehealth sessions. So we're using a little bit of Zoom and also a little bit of just Facebook video chat, surprisingly, has been working really well. And probably just another one that comes to mind is there's been kind of one or two where it's not suitable to kind of continue with telehealth because they're not, I suppose, suitable for the service, and face-to-face isn't ideal at the moment. So we've had to put it on the back burner and just kind of reach out and just make sure they're doing as well as they can at the time. But probably the other 85% are still running with face-to-face, so which is really pleasing from my end because I get a whole lot out of it as well, being in the community, as you probably know yourself.
Yeah, that's amazing. So there is one question I need to ask you, and I'm sure other people need to know as well. What's an exercise physiologist? I know what a personal trainer is because I have one myself. Is there a difference? What do you do that's different from that? Like, what's your different qualifications, backgrounds? I need to know all this. I'm sure other people do as well.
Yeah, good question. So I suppose really simply, without boring people with details, exercise physiology is an allied health profession or professional. So, if within disability circles, allied health professionals are I suppose, a phrase that gets bandied around quite a lot. So, if you think occupational therapist, physiotherapist, exercise physiology fits into that category there. So, EP, I call it, so EP is exercise physiology for short. It's a master's degree course. So with a prerequisite of doing an undergraduate. So typically when I was coming up through uni, it was an exercise sports science undergraduate. But in the last couple of years since I've been out and practicing, a few unis have actually now brought out an undergraduate bachelor's degree. So there is now a clear pathway to do an undergraduate in kind of exercise rehabilitation and then do the master's to be graduate, I suppose, qualified as an exercise physiologist. So it's starting to become a little bit more pathway based. So the 4.5 years of education when I went through, the first 3 years was a little bit more general with sports science, but now it is becoming a little bit more tailored around being ready to go out into the community. So that's I suppose, the tertiary component of it. So us as health professionals, we specialise in exercise, lifestyle, and rehab interventions. So I think the big one I want to kind of try and get across tonight and throughout chat is that exercise physiology isn't just exercise. So that's probably the big thing where, people kind of think, you cut yourself that exercise physiology, personal training, there is a big component of psychosocial health as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, I think, with some of the questions you flicked through. That I think it's really important. So just as a bit of I suppose, an idea of the people we work with, so as well as people with disabilities. So I'm working with, at the moment, people with autism, some stroke patients, people with PTSD, anxiety, depression as well, but with some deep-seated trauma and things like that too. So bipolar and schizoaffective disorder are two other conditions of some of the clients I'm working with at the moment, which is awesome. It's so wide-ranging. That's the awesome part of the job. And then more broadly to that, so if there's other exercise physiologists working in the community, they might be working with people who have had road trauma accidents, so with TAC, or work site accidents, so people who have been injured at work, DVA, Department of Veteran Affairs, so people who have been injured in the line of duty, which has been quite a lot of people in Australia. They've now received funding for their treatment, and then also people living with diabetes and cardiovascular disease and things like that also. So, and then the last one is your typical one that people think of when it comes to rehab is musculoskeletal. So, if you've hurt your knee or you've got lower back pain or something like that. So they're I suppose the umbrella of exercise physiology, and hopefully I've gone a little ways to give you a bit of an overview.
I have definitely learnt something there. I didn't realise it was so broad.
Awesome.
That has actually blown my mind, which is really cool. I've learned something myself, and I'm sure people watching this will learn things as well. So what does in broad terms, I guess, generally, what do you do with your clients? Just run me through like a session that you might do with your clients, for example. Like, what sort of things do you do when you've got all that you deal with? What do you do?
So it's it's client to client dependent, like any working with people, support workers or education like yourself. It is going to be, there's always a bias towards what you're doing and why you're doing it. But just, I suppose, as a bit of a broad overview, so the business itself is fully mobile. So in that sense, it is trying to tailor for whatever comes at us. So we do a lot of, there is a lot of strength work in there. Sometimes it can be as simple as going for a walk and talking to the participant. So I'm quite big on firstly rapport and having a really good relationship with the participant and not making it feel like it's a chore. So if you kind of think back to, personal training examples previously, I've heard some really horror stories of people having to go and see their PT. And look, whilst it might be enjoyable for some, a lot of the time it's not enjoyable. So a big philosophy for me is making exercise something people to look forward to, and something that they, in their week, they want to do. So for people that looks different. So to answer your question without waffling too much, that can be kind of, depending on the goal of the participant, there can be some cardiovascular component in that. There could be some balance and proprioception in that as well. So if the people are high risk of falls, or their capacity to perform activities of daily living aren't where we want them to be, we can put some tailored exercise in around that as well. I do a component of some, I suppose, softer side of things, so some yoga, Pilates, and stretching with some clients where stress management's a big thing. Yeah. And then there's other times where, other clients like to be pushed in a circuit structure. So if you picture working with your PT and, working in a bit of a high intensity circuit, some clients respond better to that. Yeah, you get triggered.
Every time after my session with my PT, I send him a message the next day telling him I hate his guts. So yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, so those kind of sessions are in there as well. So it is, it's dependent on the person and what the condition is and the personality. So it's different person to person. But I'd like to think, I suppose, the operating principle over it all is by the end you feel better than when you started. And sometimes you have to work a little bit harder to get to that than you want to. But, hopefully that the relationship's there and you enjoy what you're doing. So, it's
for? When you're doing a session, how long do you usually go for?
The session blocks are an hour always. Okay. So look, and that'll depend on the capacity of the participant. It won't be a full hour of exercise. So by the time I always make a point to kind of try and check in with the participant before and after the session, just to kind of take stock and see how they are from a mental perspective, what's been happening in their week, if they've got any feedback from a physical perspective. So using that as a bit of a basis to start the session. And then from an exercise perspective, it's probably about for other side to have a chit chat and catch up with what's going on there.
That's actually really cool. I'm actually just learned something myself. All right, so I didn't realize it was so broad. That is, you're working with people, ability can be many things, both physical and mental. That's all counted as disability. 100%. So what sort of, let me check for people with disabilities, like what do you find the clients that you work with, what do they gain from it? What difference do you notice in them over a period of time?
Yeah, so awesome question, firstly. So when I was having a look at the notes that you flicked through, I thought it was important to maybe flip it on its head. And I think the first thing people go to is physical straight away, because exercise physiology kind of sounds like physical, and exercise is always movement based for most people. So from my perspective, both via the literature and also firsthand experiences working with quite a few different types of clients, I think the psychosocial side of things is really, really important. It's worth talking about first. Before the physical. So I suppose really broadly speaking, there is an element of social interaction that comes with exercise. And even if it doesn't have to just be with a health professional, it can be with your support worker or your carer or your friend or whoever you're working with. It doesn't just have to be the person you've booked in to do exercise for the session with. I found from I suppose a moods perspective, mood regulation is a really big one as well. And that doesn't just have to be people with behavioural problems. There can be people who, just typical people like us, everyday life does throw some challenges up from a mood perspective. So mood regulation is a really big one. I suppose the impact it has on decreasing symptoms of anxiety and depression in that short period of time, but also that flow-on effect is important as well. So they're probably the big ones from a psychosocial perspective. And then I've also probably noticed, probably more firsthand, some really interesting ones that just a shift in mindset. So people are often quite positive and optimistic. Even if they don't start like that in the session, they will kind of shift the mindset throughout. And I've noticed that even through just information processing, and they tend to be clearer with their thoughts and how they kind of almost assess things and decipher for themselves. Because I think a big thing with the NDIS and with everything is that I'm really big on making the point of the participant having some buy-in in their intervention. So whilst there's a lot of supports and services that are there to cater for the needs of the person, it needs to be a team effort as well.
Yeah.
So, and I think maybe with education, you've probably found as well that to have people buy in, you need to kind of ensure that they see your vision in a sense as well, maybe the way to put it. Yeah. So that's one component. Leading into the cognitive and behavioural stuff is another thing I've got written down there. So when we talk, I suppose, autism broadly, because I've got quite a few autistic participants, and I think this is a really big thing that whoever watches this can take away is that exercise is phenomenal for helping to manage some of those behaviours related to autism. Really potent. So, and that's probably a big one is the stimming and repetitive behaviours I've noticed. So what I've found is just as a side note, some of, and I was talking about this earlier with one of my participants' mums to you before this, she's kind of used exercise as almost like a prerequisite to education. So where she's found previously that her son's, been quite dialed up with his repetitive behaviours and his stimming and things like that, getting that exercise in to kind of burn some of that energy has a really big impact on down regulating some of those stimming behaviours that were pretty common with autism. So that's a massive one, that cognitive and behavioural. And then also through that, the flow on is when they do sit down and do their education, this flows on with not only autistic participants, but, even older learning, and when, support workers are talking to their participants, and the academic and, I suppose, ability to intake information is a lot more, people are more receptive to information as well. So, they're probably they're cognitive. So I think it was, kind of the way I thought about it was really kind of important to focus on maybe the not so forefront ones, so the obscure benefits first, because they're the things I've noticed people are benefiting from quite a lot. So that, so, and it's awesome talking about it. It's just looking back and reflecting on notes and running through and thinking of examples. It's so positive to kind of see those benefits outside of just your typical physical, because people are sometimes, focused on weight loss and improving core strength, and all those things are really good goals. But it's also important to not just gloss over all these other amazing things that are happening that we can't see.
That's
as well.
So true. Especially working with clients with a disability as well. The fact that it's almost like a 360-degree all-round sort of thing that they're experiencing and they're gaining from it. There's so much, not just a physical, as you said, there's an emotional side, there's, cognitive side, which is, phenomenal for a lot of people. Even just, the companionship, having someone, there with them and to talk to you and things like that is so important as well.
Absolutely. And it's that's a big part of the job. Where you're absolutely 100% spot on. That's a big part of the job and I suppose we get a lot of, and you probably can speak for you as well. You get quite a lot of, I suppose, some self-satisfaction in knowing that you've made a difference on people from, I suppose, a personal touch on them, even if you can't get too close to them with social distancing and things like that. Being in the person's presence and working with them and having these conversations centered around exercise and lifestyle, and it might even be chatting about family and things like that, does really make a difference on mental health, and that flows on so much.
Especially now during all this ISO pandemic hoo-ha crapola thing that's going on. Let's be honest, that's what's going on. Who knows what's happening? It's so important that your service and what you do provides that for your clients as well, because I can imagine some of them, especially those with mental health issues, would find this time, full of anxiety and would be actually really, really hard for them. and to be
Yeah.
able to continue what you do with them would benefit them no end.
Yeah, so I've really good point. Just thinking of an example with one of the clients that we're working with, and he's I suppose, from a mental health perspective and a few other things going on. Typically a lot of NDIS participants, unfortunately, are quite socially isolated a lot of the time, and the supports that they receive are a lot of the time it is life changing, and that's the way I suppose as support workers and service providers we need to take that responsibility on of looking at it like that. And if you're kind of removing those social isolation, I suppose removing their supports and making them more socially isolated, it's a really tricky time for a lot of people, particularly if their only connection to the outside world and social connection is the supports coming into their safe space. So it's really important. It's amazing that we've been able to continue on with what we're doing, and you're no different. You're obviously continuing on, albeit a little bit different, but
just got to keep going. But that is I got spine tingles down my back with all that you've been doing. That is just it's great to see. Blown me away. My head's working overtime now with other ideas and other things. So don't be surprised if I call you up for other things, because my mind's going insane right now.
It goes both ways, because I've learned so much off so many more experienced service providers than what I am, and just people have just reframed things differently, and just having conversations with people who in the same headspace. I walk away and think like, far out, I've missed so much that I could be doing here, and you take it away and you put it. So that's why these things are awesome.
Yeah, no, that's so cool. Now, one thing, obviously, in this Facebook group that we've kind of put together, Nietzsche and I, it's full of support workers. They all come from different walks of life, work with different people. Some of them might be coordinators. Some might do the hands-on type of thing, all sorts of different things. But I guess, everybody needs support and everybody needs training. So what are some of the activities or some of the things that you can tell our support workers in our group here that they can probably implement with their clients that might help them? Obviously, they wouldn't have the knowledge or the speciality that you have, but things maybe they could do from there and that you found might help, their clients.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's important to note that exercise should be accessible for everyone. And it doesn't have to be, if you don't have the funding for an exercise physiologist or a personal trainer, that's okay, because not everyone does. So that's the first point, is that it should be inclusive.
So when you say that, obviously, when it comes to NDIS funding, you're obviously a separate line, separate thing altogether. You're not classed as a support worker. Is that correct?
No, so it's different, so we've got our line. So it's improved health and well-being and improved activities of daily living type of thing. So there's a few there. It's under capacity building. So we've recently we've now got two line items that can be pulled from, which is really cool. But it is different. To answer your question, it's different to the support worker line item of the support code. So it is a little bit, so not everyone can access it, so which is a shame, but the positive is, through, I suppose, platforms like this, and I try and get stuff out on social media of just trying to show what you can do. There is scope to do exercise if you're not an expert at it, most definitely. So a really easy one, right off the bat, and this is where I suppose you just have to kind of, where you can do it, where it's safe and where you can access the community. Walking is that's just your number one, really easy. It's just keep it simple. It's low cost, and provided that your participant it's I suppose realistic for the participant to do. It's really good because you are moving out of the house into the community. Like I said, provided you can do it in the park and there's no immunity issues. So there is some factors to take in now, and that's important to note. But in a perfect world, post-COVID and things like that, moving forward, walking's an awesome one. You can go and get a coffee and bits and pieces like that. And the fresh air is really good for your mental health, and you're also getting vitamin D in. So there is a few other little tricks in there that Yeah, exactly. So you don't think about it, but there is some, I suppose, physiology and science behind why it's really good. And the research, if we're going to get nerdy for just a second,
Yeah, go
the
for
most up-to-date research is that even just 10 minutes of walking is enough to improve mental health. So, notably, so,
Yeah.
your brain chemistry and your endorphins and, your serotonin and bring up a little bit of your adrenaline. So all those those nice things to make you feel good. It's only 10 minutes worth. So even if your capacity for you as a support worker for your participant isn't amazing, it might only just be a walk up and down the street and back, or driving to the coffee shop and going for a stroll. So that's one there. And I wanted to make sure I had a little bit of other exercise stuff. So even using the chair for some sit to stands. So
Okay.
just sitting, if you're sitting on a chair, so just imagine sitting down and then standing up, just really slow and controlled. Most people can still do that, depending on their capacity. If you can't do that, you can always have your hands on a bench or a table, or just using some support from there. From a movement perspective, if you've got access to like balls or things like that, throwing and catching is really good as well. Yeah, it's just easy. Really keep it simple. Keep it,
Great.
yeah, throwing and catching is good. Anything balance related is great as well. So if you imagine you've got a kitchen bench or just a really nice stable space, doing single leg balance, really, really easy. So that's not tricky to implement at all. You can play around with closing one eye or opening one eye. You can throw the ball to your participant whilst they're balancing. Step ups are another really good thing as well if you're in housebound. So if you've got rails for accessibility, there's no reason why the participant can't hold on to the rail and do some step ups. So really good for coordination and balance, and also good for cardiovascular injuries as well. So
I know
there is a few things there.
That to me, step ups, I hate them to death. Especially when you get to the ginormous block that's probably about half the size as I am, and I'm pretty short. I'm 100 meters tall, so I feel like I'm climbing a mountain, and then he tells me to do like 40 of them or something silly like that. But I know that's not what you guys do, but that's actually really interesting that you actually mentioned that. I had a little chuckle to myself then.
Yeah, so the premise is still the same. It's just just the height of the step. Yeah. So I suppose after this, because this is obviously going to go to people who can watch it afterwards of being live. If there is any questions about if they've got certain pieces of equipment, feel free to message the group or send me a personal message. I'm more than happy to flick through some exercise ideas with what you've got, whether it be dumbbells or even cans of vegetables or the stretchy bands. Often people have a lot of those, so I'm more than happy to flick through some specific stuff if people have some questions.
Awesome. That's actually really good. You're giving people a whole lot of good information there, good activities to do, which are so important. Now, the last question I've got here is probably so important to everyone. How do you deal with the demands of your job? I mean, I know I go crazy all the time with the demands of my crazy life that I live. That's just me. How do you do it? I mean, how many clients do you see a day, and how do you cope with all this?
So overall, I'm probably seeing anywhere between 4 and 5 clients a day. Some days it will be a little bit less, but generally about 4 clients a day. So that involves a little bit of travel as well. So it is kind of nice. I do get a little bit of time, I suppose, to decompress between that, which is cool. But as you probably know, that your mind's always ticking. Just because you care about your participants and you care about your people you're working with and the broader network, and particularly if you've got good relationships with other support workers and service providers and plan managers and you name it, and their families and stuff, you're always kind of mindful of wanting to do right by them and give them the best service and care you can possible. So it does get tiring. So outside of being cliche, whilst I'm an exercise physiologist, exercise helps.
How did I know you were going to say that? I knew it was.
I know. Sorry. It's stereotypical. But that doesn't just mean weights or running. I do like to do, stretching and some breath work and things like that as well. I know it sounds a little bit left of center, but it really does help. So when we've got, normally in a perfect world, if there is access to like a spa or a sauna, I really do like to get in there and do some stuff in there. And I often do encourage participants and clients, if they do like water and saunas and things like that, they're really good from a stress management perspective to get moving in. So that's probably a little avenue there. And now at the moment, it's getting my big body into a bath, even though I'm too big for it. But I'll jump into a bath and just make do, like we all are. We're making do at the moment. So, just all arms and legs in the bath, dangling around.
Whatever it takes, Luke, whatever you're going to do it, right?
Exactly right. So, and then probably the other one for other support workers, which I think is a good one, is having some hobbies outside of your profession.
Yeah.
So I think you were saying that you kind of like to get away and go and do bits and pieces interstate or whatever. That's a really good one. That's awesome. Just whatever it is. And I think an interesting one is if you've got a really tight network of friends who are in the industry, sometimes it's good to branch out from that. So if you've got, I know, being as a healthcare professional, I've got friends who are exercise physiologists and physiotherapists and occupational therapists and all the way through the health spectrum. Sometimes it's nice to kind of engage with friends and other people who are in a different industry as well.
Yeah.
So it just kind of gives you some new subject matter as well. So that's probably the one. Don't give your friends a sack. Please don't say that I said that. But yeah, hobbies outside of your profession, particularly if you're kind of, you're doing the ISO thing, and it's work out in the community and you're working on your laptop. It's nice to kind of have that outlet from there. What are you doing? What are you doing to deal with the demands of your job?
Sleeping, trying to. No, I go for walks, very long walks is what I've been doing. And I do that regardless whether I was in isolation or not. Working out with my PT, and he's given me stuff to do at home during isolation anyway. Awesome. I find that just clears my head because I deal with a million different facets of our company every day. So I just need that time to switch off. Pre-COVID, used to love going out to restaurants with my husband and spending a bit of time with him because we don't see each other very much with all the crazy stuff we do. So that's kind of cool. What else do I do? Catching up with friends, as you said. That's always a fun bit, just hanging out and, doing silly stuff. That's really cool as well. And I find that helps. And shopping.
A nice reset.
Yeah, and also shopping. I love shopping.
Of course, you got shopping in there.
So that's what I do to de-stress, I guess.
Are you online shopping at the moment?
Look, no, not really. I'm being pretty good, which is good. I've kind of I've actually rediscovered Netflix. So I got to a point in time where I got so busy I didn't even get time to watch Netflix or anything like that. So I've kind of had a bit of downtime recently, and I kind of use that as a distraction from everything that was going on, which is pretty cool. Some really bingy, silly, stupid shows that I probably would have never watched, which I did, which, as I say to my husband, it's like Home and Away on TV, brain numbing. You don't have to think when you watch it. It's just sitting there and your brain goes to mush, which I really like doing if I get a chance to do it. So that's one thing that I've been doing, watching brain numbingly good TV. But, you don't have to think.
It's funny, on Netflix, one of the trending TV shows at the moment that's on there, I don't know whether it's just Australia or not, it's some really stupid reality TV show. And it just goes to show what you've said is obviously the case for other people as well, because someone's consuming it.
Tiger King, because we've watched that one. I've done that one, and I'm just like, that was awfully mushy brain material happening right there, and that's exactly what I needed.
We binged it over a weekend.
Yeah, I think we did too, but then I got a little bit bored because I'm one of these people who gets bored pretty quickly. So I need to change the scenery, need to change it up a little bit every now and then. But yeah, it was brain-numbingly good. So anybody who's watching this, Tiger King to numb your brain.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, absolutely. Agree.
Well, Luke,
you won't regret it.
Yeah, it's also whatever it takes. And I'm telling you, whatever it takes. It's hilarious. Anyway, we might wrap it up there for tonight. It has been amazing to talk to you, and I'm sure we'll see you soon in some sort of capacity, especially with our support workers helping them out. I know you
absolutely.
So, you know, if anybody wants any questions asked, pop them in there. Luke will help you out. Yeah, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you. Much appreciated.
No worries.
You've been a welcome.
Thank you.
So it's been great.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Anytime, and keep up the good work and keep spamming those groups. You never know who else might find you.
Thank you.
Cool. All right, Luke. Thank you. See ya.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.